Okay, welcome everybody. You have found your way into the University Lowbrow Astronomers, in this case, September meeting. And as most of you know, I'm Charlie Nielsen, the president of the club. It seems like it's been for eternity, so but I can't get out of it, it seems. But anyway, we won't let it talk. What? So, also consider that after this meeting, it is being recorded and we upload it to Zoom. Just we like to have everybody know that at every time. So. And as usual, we're going to have our guest speaker first. So if anybody is here just for that and really doesn't want to stick around for our vastly entertaining business meeting afterwards, we might let you escape. So, and first, I would like to thank Ken Cook for coming up with yet another speaker for us, in this case, Avital. So thank you very much, Ken, because I know he's out there in the Zoom audience. So Avital has recently graduated from Eastern Michigan University. As I like to say, it's a shade of green we do like, unlike the ones up in East Lansing. Avital recently graduated from Eastern Michigan with a Bachelor of Science in Physics research. Her main interests lie in astrophysics, which she plans to focus on in her PhD program in the near future. The Oort cloud specifically sparked her interest in physics and was the focus of her senior thesis in her bachelor's degree program. At EMU, Avital also enjoyed being active in both the physics and astronomy clubs. If you were present at our July meeting, in fact, you might get a chance to meet her over at Eastern Michigan. She always seeks to learn more and she loves to help others explore physics and astronomy. Tonight, we're honored to have her with us for a presentation, and I think that got changed on us to one I think is a little easier to read actually, and that is the history and future of mapping the Oort cloud. Her talk will cover the past, the history of the Oort and its significance to space exploration, the present, current research and models, and the future, her research and proposal to image an Oort cloud object. So let's hear how she's going to do it.
And the right button. Takes a second. There we go.
Everyone can hear me okay from here on Zoom and everything?
We can hear you.
Now I can.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on Zoom and in person, and thank you for that introduction. That was what I was going to say. So yes, my name is Avital Keeley. I just graduated from Eastern Michigan University, and as part of my senior year, I completed an honors thesis on the Oort cloud, which I will be talking about tonight. So chronologically, this talk will roughly follow the path that my research took, which will include the original hypothesis of the Oort cloud and what it is. And then we'll look at current research and looking into it, what we've learned in the past 70 years or so, and the models we've been able to make from that research. Finally, we'll look at the future missions and the hope we have to learn more about the Oort cloud with the next round of space exploration instruments. But before I get on to the good stuff, I want to note how beautifully timed this talk is, because just last month there was a newly discovered comet. Can I see a show of hands from those in the room who's heard of this? I assumed so, yeah. So Comet Nishimura was discovered just about 4 weeks ago, and based on its hyperbolic orbit, we do believe it's the most recently discovered Oort cloud object. If you're interested in observing it, I highly recommend it. It is perihelion basically now, technically in 2 days' time. And since it's pretty new, every observation we make helps refine its orbit and learn some characteristics about it. If you are interested in observing it, here is a cool diagram I found of its path from just about Discovery over by Gemini, and now it's headed towards Virgo, where it will be for perihelion on September 17th. At perihelion, it should be a magnitude 2.5, and it could be visible with the naked eye. If not, binoculars will do just fine. So again, I highly encourage everyone to try to see it. Now, the best observing time is about sunset, but it's 12 degrees away from the sun, so there's a very limited time of opportunity to be able to see it. I tried this morning and I couldn't find it, and this talk is perfectly timed that we could be trying to look at it now, but try again next time it's clear. Now, here's another diagram of its orbit, and we can see that it's slingshotting around the sun, but what we can't see in this clip is the uncertainty. As I mentioned before, we think it's on a hyperbolic orbit, but another resource I read said it's on an elliptic orbit. And then another resource I read got updated and said elliptic and hyperbolic again. So my point is we don't fully know. And its orbit highly impacts how we expect this comet to return to the Oort cloud and its fate. One hypothesis I saw said that it's on a hyperbolic orbit and it will go out to the inner Oort cloud where it will remain on a 435-year period. Another hypothesis is that it will slingshot around the sun and exit the solar system, never to be seen again. But we have to consider that since it's passing only 0.23 AU from the sun, there's a chance that its nucleus will burn up and it won't matter where it would have gone anyway. So without further ado, let's talk about the Oort cloud. Can I again see a show of hands of who's heard of the Oort cloud before? Awesome. Does anyone want to share a fact they know about it?
It's big.
It's big, yes.
Yeah, it may extend halfway to Alpha Centauri.
Yes, possibly. So yes, the Oort cloud is the hypothesized shell of icy objects that encompasses our solar system, and it's believed to be the origin of these long period comets that we see so often. The Oort cloud was originally hypothesized in 1950 by a Dutch astronomer, Jan Oort, who really wanted an explanation for these comets he kept seeing. He realized that if you backtrack their orbits, they all came from about the same distance from the sun. So there had to be something there. There had to be some sort of cometary reservoir that's large enough and has enough comets in it that they're not depleted. It can sling a couple comets in every year or so. It also has to be moving with us because we've seen these comets for so many years. And so the Oort cloud was born. He originally hypothesized that shell that we see, which extends up to about 100,000 AU. Then later research suggested a second part of the Oort cloud, this torus you see on the orbital plane. That inner Oort cloud extends from about 10,000 AU to 20,000 AU, at which part the shell takes over, as we saw before. Now, I can explain how I got into astrophysics and my problem with Oort cloud research today with one story. I take you guys back to the year 2016. I was just beginning high school. And long story short, a few months after this photo was taken, I got to wondering, what is space like 9 light months from Earth? I knew it was past Pluto's orbit, so it had to be well outside of our solar system. But I knew that it wasn't to our closest star neighbor yet, so I wondered what could be there. Was it just empty space, or as I thought back then, could there be a brown dwarf hiding there? It didn't take me much research to learn that 9 light months from Earth is smack dab in the middle of the Oort cloud. And then I was immediately fascinated, because here was something I had never heard of before. Not just that, but I was being told it was part of our solar system. And I'm sure we all had the same childhood, save Pluto as a planet, where from a young age, we're taught that all the planets in orbit, we're taught their names, about the asteroid belts and everything in our solar system. But here was the Oort cloud, which was said to be the edge of our solar system, and I had never heard of it before. So I got to researching all that I could about it and reading every paper I could find. What I learned was there were not a lot of papers to read, and those that I could find seemed to repeat a lot of the same information. And that bothered me. I quickly realized that we didn't know a lot about the Oort cloud, and on top of that, we couldn't understand a lot about it. And nothing drives me more than knowing that something is so close to us in space and we don't fully understand it. So I Googled how to study the Oort cloud, and Google told me to get a PhD in astrophysics. So then I Googled how to get a PhD in astrophysics, and it told me to get a bachelor's in physics, so here I am. But what I learned in my undergraduate education reinstated what I had learned when I was 13, which is that the Oort cloud is hypothesized, but not enough people care enough about it to make it anything more than that. Instead, resources are put towards more new and exciting topics like exoplanets. And don't get me wrong, I love exoplanets too. But again, I just can't sit with the fact that we don't understand the Oort cloud, and we talk about it like we do, and we mention it, but we don't put the research and resources into it to fully prove its existence. And that's what I set out to do, is fully prove its existence to the best that we could. In my opinion, the best empirical evidence is to image it. If we were able to image the Oort cloud, or rather Oort cloud objects in their original location, we could concretely define those boundaries. As I had mentioned earlier, the inner Oort cloud extends from 10,000 AU to 20,000 AU, and 20,000 AU to 100,000 AU is the outer Oort cloud, but those are basically rough estimates. Every paper I read in my thesis reported slightly different values, even that the outer Oort cloud could extend up to 150,000 AU. If we were able to image it, we'd have a more concrete understanding of where these regions change and where they start and end. We could also fully say that it exists and we know stuff about it and we know where it is. Once we have a stronger foundational understanding of the Oort cloud, we can use it as a jumping off point for further research, whether that be continuing on the Oort cloud or looking at those long period comets it sends us. We could look at Oort clouds around other stars, which we do believe exist. And if we ever want to escape our solar system, we would need to know what we'd be passing through and for how far. So it was with this passion that I began my senior thesis last year. My senior thesis is primarily a literary research summary. I began by reading the most recent research papers on the Oort cloud that I could find. Then I read some older sources so I could compare how the hypotheses had evolved over time. And finally, I conflated everything that I had learned into theorizing my own telescope that should be capable of imaging an Oort cloud object. So while I started my thesis with a strong understanding of what the Oort cloud is, I then quickly learned some theoretically calculated values of how many comets are actually in the cloud, where it is, those boundaries I had mentioned earlier, and how much we think this cloud actually weighs. But what I learned about these parameters specifically is that their values vary greatly from the inner and outer regions, so we need to look at them separately. We can start by looking at the mass, and we see that the outer Oort cloud is about twice as massive as that of the inner Oort cloud. The authors of the paper predicted the inner Oort cloud to weigh 3.3 Earth masses, while the outer Oort cloud has 6 to 7 Earth masses. And this fits when we consider that the outer Oort cloud occupies about 4 times as much space. And again, it extends to 100,000 AU or even further. So logically, once we have mass and volume, we can look at the density. And we can expect to see this trend continue, that the outer Oort cloud massively outweighs the inner Oort cloud. What the authors reported is that the outer Oort cloud contains 330 billion comets, but they didn't have enough observational data to confidently report a value for the inner Oort cloud. And this is mostly just based on comet orbits. So those big, bright, light up the night sky, once in a lifetime comets we're used to, like Neowise, ZTF, Nishimura, even Hale-Bopp, we think those come from the outer Oort cloud. And that's what the outer Oort cloud is known for, is slinging 1 or 2 big and bright comets every few years that make it to our inner solar system. However, the inner Oort cloud releases comets in packets. And first, these comets are much smaller and typically not as bright, so it's a lot harder to see them. And second, the packets are much less frequent than the outer Oort cloud comets. And this is because the packets are released either from perturbations from passing stars or galactic tides. Not a lot is known about how these events affect the dynamics of our Oort cloud, and we essentially do not understand why the inner Oort cloud only releases comets in packets. So, of course, to make up for the lack of observational data, researchers instead turn to theoretically simulated models to look at the origin and evolution of the Oort cloud. But these models had very low agreement rates with the observations we have made. One example is a Halley-type comet radar stream that reported most of their comets exhibited retrograde motion, which contradicts the prograde motion we've observed with most comets. This has two effects on the models. First, retrograde comets are expected to survive almost twice as long as those in prograde motion. I think we can all see how when you're trying to look at the evolution of a system over time, your subjects lasting twice as long kind of muddies the waters. And secondly, the difference in motion affects the types of orbits that we expect these comets to be captured into. Additionally, this same team reported that 64% of Halley-type comets had semi-major axes inside Saturn's orbit, but only 21% of observed Halley-type comets have the same. However, the difference between theory and observation is understandable when you consider how many assumptions have to be made to model the Oort cloud. Most papers I read reported that they played around with the timescale to some degree. So this typically included speeding up how long it took for the Oort cloud to evolve. Another team reported that they shifted the beginning of the Oort cloud so that it began forming after the solar system had developed. Then on top of that, researchers have to deal with that lack of observational data. The Halley-type team only had 12 sets of observational data to work with. So they created 27,000 test particles, which of course introduced a lot of uncertainty. So when trying to model the Oort cloud, it is basically inevitable to have to make some assumptions. And when I began to theorize my telescope, I made some base assumptions, which included that the average Oort cloud object has a diameter of 74 kilometers. And then I placed my target object as close as possible just to make imaging easier, which is at the edge of the inner Oort cloud at about 10,000 AU. Then I had to pick a wavelength to image at, which I started with 1.1 micrometer, as we can see, but that is the most variable of all of my assumptions. As I continue my research, I do plan to play around with the wavelength and ultimately find the optimal one for imaging. But with these assumptions, I could calculate the size of the telescope that I would need, which came out to be a minimum of 27.1 kilometer diameter.
Well, okay, that's.
That was precisely my reaction. I was immediately very disheartened because I couldn't think of any telescope nearly that size. But then I learned about radio interferometry, and I finally learned that telescopes are not always one single dish, one single lens or mirror. And in fact, that 27.1 kilometers needs to be the effective diameter. In the picture, we can see the Very Large Array, which has a maximum effective diameter of 35 kilometers. So 27 is not possible. But the Very Large Array and other large radio interferometers are ground-based. And of course, I would want mine to be space-based. By getting out of Earth's atmosphere, we of course eliminate atmospheric interference. And by getting it into space, well, we minimize interstellar interference by getting it farther into space. And the farther into space it is, simply put, the easier it is to image because we're that much closer to our target object. And also, images would be higher quality if we were able to get them. But this is not the kind of mission I can entirely do by myself as a senior in undergraduate college. I mean, launching a 27.1 kilometer diameter space-based radio interferometer would need some help from the big guys. However, I think it's safe to say that the big guys who could help with this mission probably wouldn't go for it. And so I had to adjust my expectations. I know that imaging the Oort cloud is a career-long or even beyond that timeline. And we know that these ambitious new space-based telescopes start with very long timelines anyway. And on top of that, in the case of James Webb most recently, these long timelines run into delays after delays after delays. And what these delays typically do is they push that budget over what was already allotted. And I think it's safe to say that the Oort cloud would not have the largest budget to begin with anyway. And this unfortunately makes sense when we consider that budget is allotted in part due to how much the people care about it, how excited they are to see this mission get off the ground and see the results come in. I think by now we can all agree that the Oort cloud is not really a fan favorite and people wouldn't really want to pay even more for it to get done. And as disheartening as all of these obstacles are, it's pretty understandable when I consider what an incredible feat it would be to image an Oort cloud object. I mean, simply put, we are looking for a needle in a haystack. The fact of the matter is that we are trying to image something so far out there, it barely reflects any sunlight. And it's so small that it barely reflects any heat, or it barely emits any heat of its own for us to detect. But while it's difficult, it's not impossible, and I do plan to continue my research. My next step is to develop software that can test the capabilities of my telescope. More so, just refine those parameters from the assumptions I mentioned earlier. And I'll do this by making the most simplified model of the Oort cloud I can. And this assumes that all Oort cloud objects have that same 74-kilometer diameter, and then I'll assume an isotropic distribution in every axis of the Oort cloud. My research will also include staying up to date with the Oort cloud research community. This summer, I fortunately learned that Oort cloud research is alive and thriving, save for having zero funding. But I was also fortunate enough that some of my idols through my thesis have now become my mentors. And I learned that there is hope yet to learn more about the Oort cloud. I think most excitedly is the Vera Rubin LSST, which will come online in the first quarter of 2025. One of the 4 main science goals of the LSST is to inventory the solar system, and this includes Kuiper Belt and Oort cloud objects. I'm also proud to announce that because of my Oort cloud mentors, I've been accepted to the Outer Solar System Working Group of the Science Collaboration Team with the LSST. So I'll be sure to stay in touch and receive all updates on Oort cloud research. In the meantime, until 2025, we can be reminded of the Oort cloud through the comets it sends our way. Here again, we see Comet Nishimura, which again is perihelion right now, and if you want to see it, I highly encourage it. And if you do, please let me know, because I tried 3 times and I haven't been able to see it. And the next exciting comet is Pons-Brooks, which will be perigee and perihelion in April 2024, just in time for the solar eclipse. As the picture kind of already spoiled, it'll be 20 degrees away from the sun during the eclipse, and because of the total darkness, it should be a naked eye object. So I highly recommend trying to see it. It's difficult, but not impossible to see until then. So events like these and being invited to speak here tonight with you all gives me hope that people do care about the Oort cloud, and we will learn more about it in the decade to come. And soon we will know some more truth about what surrounds our solar system. Thank you.
Excellent talk, Avital. Excellent.
Are there any questions?
How did you pick the average diameter? Because it seemed a little.
It's, yeah, so I prepared an extra slide for this. And so of the, I looked at the largest comets that we've seen. Obviously, Bernardinelli Bernstein is the largest we've observed. And so I looked at these largest and I picked the smallest of those, which is probably ambitious and probably a little too hopeful. Most comets are smaller than 2 kilometers in diameter, but I would like to assume that the largest we've observed are not the only large ones out there. And also for imaging's sake, I wanted a big number to tell myself it's possible. So yeah, I picked 74 as Hale-Bopp's diameter and the smallest of the largest observed. Yes.
Of the New Horizons spacecraft after past Pluto encountered multiple fluids. Would you consider that what cloud objects?
I don't think I'm familiar with that one. What was its name?
Well, they changed the name. When it was discovered, the New Horizons spacecraft, of course, went past Pluto. And after it left Pluto, they looked to see if they could find any other objects to look at. And they found this object called Ultima, THULE. And they changed the spacecraft trajectory slightly and they covered it, pictures of it. And it's this weird blob of 2 shaped things stuck together. But it's way out past Pluto. And I don't think it'd be considered important object.
I'm not familiar with that, so I can't speak to it, but I will look into that probably tonight. Yeah, it would probably depend on its orbit and where we think it came from, but I can look into that.
It's a further side thing.
That's what I was gonna say. It depends like how it's moving, its trajectory. It might be a Kuiper Belt object that we saw in its kind of location. But yeah.
So you said something that I think I heard most of the comments coming in, I thought they were all fairly random orbits. But you're indicating that most of them have the same sense as the planets going around the sun, their direction path. Just a few retrograde.
Yes, that is what my research suggested. That's what I read enough. Yeah,
So
Any-
so the whole Oort cloud probably has some of that same angular direction that the solar system.
I would think, especially since it's, yeah, since it formed from the debris of, well, our star and other star systems. But I didn't see a concrete answer about how the Oort cloud rotates or anything, but yeah, since most comets are prograde, I would guess we can assume. Any other questions on Zoom or anything?
We have a question on Zoom from Kurt Hillig. It says, is the 27 kilometer telescope size based on the area needed to collect enough photons for detection, or on the resolution needed to resolve the density?
Simply the resolution. Very simplified math and also very ambitious math, so that I can be hopeful.
Okay,
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Will you, does your plan include the ability to do Doppler measurements of the light that was received in any way? So that you could determine direction, redshift of the object? I don't know if that's doable.
I'll get back to you on that. It does not yet, but I should look into that.
So we're assuming that it all moves together. Certainly it's traveling with us, but the motion, it would be interesting to be able to get by Doppler radial velocities, so you can see if there's any type of vorticity in it or anything that's moving it, and maybe pick up disturbances in it from theorized planets.
Yeah, I think that would also, maybe it's too ambitious, but if we were able to get speeds of more of the outer Oort cloud, we could possibly do some research on those dynamic shifts from passing stars and galactic tides, which were mentioned frequently, but it didn't sound like authors of the papers knew a lot about them. So I'll make note of that.
Right. Well, it's not just Doppler shift, but you're looking at the spectrum. If you can do a spectroscopy on the light you're getting back, and look at, we don't really know what we're going to get. That's the problem. You don't know what you're looking at out there, but it's such a fascinating question, and you're going to be looking at such an enormous amount of material at such a large scale. Whatever information we could collect is going to rewrite the way the solar system was created.
That's a good question. Any others?
The
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Is there any theory at this point if there might be a compositional difference between inner and out?
You cut off, but I think I got the question. If there's a difference in composition between inner Oort cloud comets and outer Oort cloud comets.
Exactly.
Nothing that I read, and I would guess that's again because most of the comets we have experience with come from the outer Oort cloud. My actual ideal situation would be to send something to the Oort cloud, but that's not my lifetime. But maybe if we were able to like go to the inner Oort cloud or somehow get data on those comets, and we could take data from the comets from the outer Oort cloud that have come through our solar system, maybe. But nothing that I've read so far that we know about.
Okay, thank you.
The wavelength you were talking about using, that was in the
Yeah, 1.1 micrometers.
micrometers. That's not in the thermal.
Honestly, this wavelength was chosen before I shifted to radio interferometry. So with the shift to radio interferometry, that opens a whole new door that I have to research and look into and compare with other scopes we've already made.
What color is one micrometer? Green.
That's-
Oh, it's way up the red. That's what I was wondering if it was thermal, or were we into the radio? Yeah, there.
I can't say off the top of my head right now, but yeah, I've played around with, I've had some suggestions about infrared or farther out or even UV. So I want to compare the best capabilities of all those wavelengths, and then also look at what scopes have we successfully launched and what did they give us, and then maybe I can just piggyback off those ideas.
Good question. So you were mentioning comments coming in from the outer Oort cloud versus the inner Oort cloud. You know, the inner tends to be in groups, the outer is the single bigger ones. But is there anything, is it just orbital dynamics that really tell us whether that was the outer or inner Oort cloud that it came from?
Basically, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at the composition if there's a difference,
yeah.
maybe.
Any other questions?
Look forward to hearing where you go with this. It's
Thank you.
exciting.
Thanks again. And as a small token of our appreciation, we would like to present you with an official club hat. See if that fits okay. That's the small medium, which I'm guessing is right. Looks good,
Thank you.
actually. Thank you. Okay. So we don't have a lot of offices here, and I think there's only 4 of us. So it's probably going to be a fairly short meeting. I just had a couple of things and they're kind of related to each other anyway. One is we do have an open house scheduled for tomorrow night. I was really challenged because all of the usual people that we rely on can't do this one. Ken was going to be able to do it, but now he's ill. He was going to be open house coordinator. And we had, I think, 2 or 3 others that said they could maybe bring scopes. Might have been 2 other than him. But none of them have ever really been a key holder and really, you know, opened and shut down the place before. But as it turns out, I gotta say, we don't have to worry about that because I think the weather's gonna wipe it out anyway. So probably expect tomorrow morning that I'm gonna send the decision out unless something drastically changes. It's gonna be that weather's not gonna let us do it, so. And now speaking of open house, the officers have had some discussion going on for a while now, and I've mentioned it too with meetings. Several of us talked about it, and that is just a general trend that we have seen over the last several years, really. And that is that our club has gotten bigger. In fact, it's grown at a pretty good rate. I remember not all that long ago, we were bragging about 100 members, and now we're over 200. You would think with more members, you have more people that can help out with things and are willing to do stuff. But as it turns out, the exact opposite has happened. In my opinion, one of the reasons is I noticed most of the people that are the people that tend to help out are some of the older group. And I think some of them are just getting to the point and I know that's the case with me. There's other things I'm interested in besides astronomy, believe it or not. And more it gets to be a matter of how much time do I have to devote to all these things. So I think maybe that's a little bit of a factor. It's just a matter of I don't quite have the energy I used to. I mean, some days I think I do, but overall maybe not. So that's one factor. And then I think, and with the younger group and some of the newer members, something I pointed out to the officers is we've noticed when Doug Scoble sends out the introductions and he's got that little description of himself. Have you noticed? It seems like almost every one of them wants to learn something and immediately jump into astrophotography. Now, astrophotography is cool. I don't really want to slam it or anything, but most people, when they get serious about astrophotographers, don't want to show up at an open house when the public, so what are you looking at? You know, because they can't show them. So I think it's just sort of an incompatible situation. There is one area there that's sort of in between, and that's the electronically assisted astronomy, like Brian Adams-Grigg or Gary Nichols, who has, I want to give him a lot of credit. He's been a regular, a lot of our public things lately. And he's got a nice little EA scope that is just absolutely, in fact, amazing what this thing can do with 4 inches of aperture to blow your mind. But things like that, I think, are good outreach tools because people can see it, you know, they can participate. But most people don't have those things. So I think that's part of it. And I think maybe a lot more people coming in now is, let's face it, this isn't a club. People come in here and they want to have fun. They don't necessarily want to do work. And maybe some of the things they see in public outreach tends to seem like more work than it does fun. I'll have to admit, it seems that way to me more lately, but that's just because I think I've done so much of it. You know, it seems like the responsibility has become bigger than what the fun was. Even last Saturday, I was up in Marquette. I'm having a blast up there doing all kinds of stuff. I reminded myself I had to change our hotline and social media things. I even asked whoever was going to be open house coordinator to please make the decision before noon, because I knew that at the time that often we do it, like Jim, for example, tends to wait until the last minute. I was not going to be able to because what I had going on up there. And what did I do? I forgot until about 3:30 anyway. So I quickly was able to change the hotline and the social media. I think I did about 5, so it wasn't the end of the world, but still, it's just the idea that, again, it was a tax to me, you know what I mean? I guess I started realizing as long as I'm president, I really can't go on vacation, not completely. But that's okay, it's a small price to pay, I guess. Although I didn't feel like that sometimes, but anyway. So we wanted to bring up this discussion. We realize we don't have a lot of people here tonight. And we really want some input, especially from people other than the officer groups that have already been beating this subject up. But I did want to introduce the subject, let people know this is something we're probably going to be beating on for a while now, because we're looking for ideas for people. To give you an idea where we're at, Jim, in fact, I think had proposed the last meeting perhaps, that maybe we have that as a requirement of membership. There are a lot of clubs that do that. You know, you have to do something to be a member of that club. Some of us, yeah.
Would that result in a reduction of dues?
No, but you're onto something, so keep that thought in mind. The thing with that is even though we could come up with examples of other kinds of clubs that do that, I don't know that we know of any astronomy clubs that do that. And to me, it just seemed against the personality of the Lowbrows. We're a very loose, laid back kind of organization. And like I presented to the officers, okay, so let's just say that we did something like that. First of all, we have to think that there's going to have to be some exceptions. There are some people that physically, for example, cannot do the things that we're asking for help with. So we have to think about how many exemptions do we give for different things. Those exemptions may multiply, yes.
Hi, daytime stuff, like, would there be exemptions for people who have a bedtime?
That what?
Like, people who, like myself, have a bedtime and can't be out at
Oh,
night?
oh yeah, well, then you're onto the whole thing. There's a lot of different things. It's a very personal thing. Everybody's gonna have certain restrictions. There are certain things. So how many things do we do? And then how many, you know, and then would somebody say, well, it's unfair, somebody got exempted, I should have been, it opens up a can of worms, in my opinion. Done.
Yeah, I think that this is a club of people who are used to enjoy astronomy, and the club's morphing. And people will enjoy, you know, we become a club that has an outstanding speaker series with the last few years. And a lot of great email exchanges, document exchanges, and that's sort of the direction it comes. People aren't observing together, it's not a choice. So it may be that you know, if we don't get enough people volunteering for open houses, we just have to stop doing it.
Yeah.
And continue on with what doesn't.
Yeah, and that's really where I kind of think we're probably headed. In a way, I kind of wrote up a thing about this and I looked back on, I thought, geez, that was really pessimistic, Charlie, but I think it was also realistic. You can't make somebody interested in something if there's not some interest there to begin with. So, and another thing I presented is, let's say that we did put some kind of, you know, rules that you have to do something or other. Well, what if somebody doesn't have an exemption and after a year or even 2 years, they've done absolutely nothing to help out with any of the things we do? What do? Kick them out? I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think any of us are really. So I think it was Doug Scoble, it might have been the first one that presented the idea of, well, okay, let's take the opposite approach and have a positive thing. Yeah, the idea that you attract more bees with honey than with vinegar. In fact, he, as far as I know, is even working on some concepts of how certain things would affect the treasury. And that would be is, as an example, you come to help out at an open house, bring a telescope out, entertain people, you get a certain amount whacked off your dues. That kind of thing that you're saying, or, you know, there's a different things we can do. That's, so the question there is, can we do enough that it's a real incentive for people without at the same time hurting the treasury? Now, I'm not too worried about the treasury because our treasury is really quite large. I don't think it would have a big impact, and if it did start having an impact, it would take a while before it hurt us. We'd have plenty of time to see that maybe this is not the right road to be on. I think maybe my more concern is that really gonna do anything? You know, if your dues are $30 and we said, well, okay, you get $10 off if you do a thing, is that really gonna have somebody do it? I don't know. It's something maybe we can try and throw it out there and just see what happens. But I got a feeling Don maybe has the right idea there, is this is just the new reality that we're facing.
I was gonna dovetail off of Don's idea a little bit. It's like maybe, you know, reducing the open houses might be the option we have to do, but
Yeah,
for those open houses that we do, maybe make them extra special. I mean, hit the PR button, use our funding to boost those Facebook events and make it a big deal, maybe once a month or something, instead of having a couple of times or whenever it's available. To make them special, maybe people would come out for a special event rather than
yeah.
more ordinary event.
And I think kind of related to what Jeff is saying too, we also have to look at like this time of year. This time of year usually is difficult to get help, period. Just because I think a lot of people are on vacation, they're going out of town. We have other astronomy things. Jim and Adrian, for example, I believe are currently driving back from Okie Tex. We've got the Great Lake Stargaze. Yeah, I'm gonna say this weekend. That's probably one of the reasons we've got people missing. Next weekend is astronomy at the beach. So that's another thing to consider. Maybe people are just astronomied out. So, I mean, and that does happen. I remember just before COVID, we had one particular year where we had just a ridiculous number of public events besides the open houses. And I remember the reality hit me as I got looking at the calendar and I thought, my God, Charlie, when I schedule these things, open houses or no, maybe especially the ones other than that, I kind of feel a responsibility to be there. And then I try to get people to help me, but I don't feel right if I'm not gonna be there, especially when I've got other people do it, then I can't make it. But then I look at the calendar and I looked at that one summer and I realized that if the weather hadn't canceled some of those events, every single weekend of the entire summer, I would have been tied up doing astronomy stuff. You know, and then I thought, well, okay, the other thing is maybe some of those we canceled, but we don't usually know that until Friday night, Saturday morning. What am I gonna do? Turn around and plan a fishing trip like that? So it's a burden, really, but yeah.
Okay, let's see how many things I can pack into this little time period, therefore confuse everybody. We're in this generation,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
And as someone said at the last meeting, why do I wanna go to someplace dark to observe when I can sit in my driveway with my scope and image this and get something better than what I can ever look at?
mm-hmm,
The joy from my youth of going out someplace dark in the middle of the night doesn't resonate
yes,
anymore. Two, you talked about all this stuff. Who was the president who started, who stood up and said we should do public open houses?
that was probably you.
But we did things different because we learned real quick, because we had 50-some members at the time. And so we did do things a little bit different, like you guys stood up in January and said, okay, we're gonna do all these open houses. Should we vote on it? And we had 30 people out of 180 or so vote. And then a couple days before the open house, you say, who's gonna help? When we did it, we actually reduced the number after the first year because there was no point in having it in November through
Yeah.
February.
Right,
There was just no point.
yeah,
It probably wasn't gonna be clear, and if there's snow on the ground, it's gonna make it difficult for everybody. So. We only had it certain months, plus we did one a month. And then what we did is at the very beginning of the year, in January, February. All the vice presidents or observatory director, I was like, or no, I was president. Was assigned to be at an open house, and you sign people up for those open houses way in advance, so they knew what they would be doing.
so that.
I
also would
don't,
be
I
like
don't know, cause the object, the object, the whole reason I suggested that we do open houses was the fact that I stood up there and I said, as a kid. I went to open houses with the Jackson Club, which hasn't existed now
Yeah, they've been gone for several
for
years.
a long time.
Yeah,
And that's what got me interested. And I think that if you wanna get people into it, yeah, we do need to do it. But you, as you said, you can't make it your life.
mhm,
You gotta have a life. And that's why we split it up, you didn't have to be at every one. I did, because at the time I was single, I had absolutely no other responsibilities or anything like that, and I was young and I could stay up all night. As you said, that ain't the way it is.
right,
So I think, yes, you should reduce the numbers. You should get people signed up in advance. I have no idea how to fight the imaging thing, because you open up Sky and Telescope or Astronomy Magazine, and what used to be about observing and building telescopes is now about imaging.
yeah, it's true.
The other good point about scheduling way ahead of time is, I mean, I volunteered for the Wausau outreach. And I'd forgotten all about it until my calendar comes up and I'm starting to look like a problem. I said I was gonna be, I have to be there. And so I think, giving people a schedule, especially these days, when everybody's life is super scheduled, ultra scheduled, that maybe that's a way to kind of nail down some of the the management of the open house to make sure that we can hold these things without asking for volunteers last minute.
Right.
Because we do the open house schedule in the first part of the year, as you recall, like
Right.
January,
Right.
February, Jim sends out a proposal.
I would
And
say
maybe
let's
that's
go-
the opportunity right there, like you're
Let's go
saying,
back to doing one a month, schedule people way in advance.
yeah,
You don't get someone signed up as one desk coordinator for that month,
you cancel it,
don't have it.
yeah,
So in March, we did March meetings, get open house coordinators assigned.
I like it.
That would help. I
mhm,
mean, with my social director, scheduling events, family events, friends events for the weekends are very important for us. And by knowing months ahead of time that June is my commitment, I can manage them. But the wishy-washy guess whether I can do July or not, depending on my social calendar.
right. That's the one downside I can see, some people are gonna not wanna commit too far out in the future. But then again, if it's only for one Saturday a month, which
Yeah.
they might not even have to do. Yeah, I think I like
And
that.
I could go on about the long-term future of the club, but I've also been asked my mouth shut.
I'll take it offline.
Well, plus, ahead of time, and find something that you really need to do that day, you have time to find someone to cover.
Yeah, because that's gonna happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at least we got
It
started.
doesn't then go back to you to
Right,
call around.
right.
But as you mentioned, and
end all private. Because if you do a private thing for one group, every other group will say, well, how come you can't do it for us?
Right,
So you do one public open house a month. You get 4 or 5 people signed up for each one, so we're talking 8 a year. Some people might be willing to do more than that. That also is gonna open up more for just the club. Now, I'm not gonna address how do you handle opening it up for it, because I don't, to be honest with you, is anybody allowed to grab a key and go out there?
not really, no,
Okay, that's, in the past, that's the way it was.
yeah. No, we got 3 keys and the U of M is extremely protective of them.
But Jim Forster has been very good. And clear nights haven't been.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seems to be working well, but again, the number of people coming out.
Right.
Sometime.
But even if we have the 8 a year, that means we might have 4 actual classes.
Right,
Yeah. That's,
and we still might have an open house coordinator and still might have difficulty getting that person help, but it's a start, so.
yeah, I mean, it's a start, and, if- are we done with that? Cause I'd like to bring up another, it has nothing to do with that.
I think for now, yeah. Yeah, again, I think. we'll
Cause you
continue later.
mentioned something,
That's one
you mentioned
And
something.
also, I think yours too.
Yeah, you mentioned something about what other clubs do. Have you ever thought about sending out some kind of a survey to all the clubs in the area? It just says, like, how many meetings do you have a year? Do you have public open houses? What are your facilities at your public open house? Like, do you have facilities at your public open houses? Which we don't.
It's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, kind of done.
We just sent out a message, basically explaining our situation here and reducing memberships, and we sent it out to Black, all the member clubs there, which covers southeastern Michigan pretty well, and the Kalamazoo Club. And I've heard back from Warren and Kalamazoo, and it sounds like they're basically in the same boat.
Yeah,
As far as the observer, they're seeing activities in other areas that are increasing. Their membership has bounced back from COVID. But the open houses and the outreach has been slow coming back. So we're not entirely alone in that aspect, but it is a common thing amongst most of the astronomy clubs. I haven't gotten back, but.
I was thinking of a very comprehensive survey.
Yeah, I understand
Do
that.
you have property that you have access to, and what degree of access do you have?
Yeah.
Cause I know, the Grand Rapids has the big observatory, property out by Lowell. Muskegon has 2 domes. They are next or on a public park, I think. So that sort of thing, and then, you know, we can find out, you know,
Yeah.
how many people put up. Well, like I said, as a kid, the Jackson Club didn't put one on every, they put on 2 or 3 a year.
But I think the initial, message out was just kind of, it was a bit informal to the people who were, reading that list and whatnot, and those are mostly the officers of those clubs.
Oh,
that are
yeah.
on that list. But I think if we sent it out a more formal survey to as many clubs, and, I don't really Black, because I have an address I can spew up really easy, and I talk with Kevin Bell often. Yes,
And, you know, we got
there's more clubs.
and Brian Otto was
we got
revealed
the
too.
big stuff.
That's one of the things he does professionally, his surveys, or did at one time, so he's volunteered to.
I
to
think we could
produce one.
leverage Brian's
Yeah,
survey.
yeah.
He could get the questions right so that we get.
Yeah.
Coherent.
Cause like the 2 I mentioned, Grand Rapids and, Muskegon. They at least got outhouses. And,
Yeah.
and Peach Mountain ain't what it used to be,
True.
both in brightness and horizons.
True. Yeah, in fact, I got one pretty nice night up in Marquette. And my hotel was right on the south edge of town, so I could be in downtown like in a mile and a half,
Right.
something like that. And I found a nice dark place out behind the hotel and got my big binoculars out. Thought, my God, this is as good right here as it is at a good night at Peach Mountain. And I'm practically in town.
Was that Friday night?
Yes, that was Friday night.
Friday night was me, I was at the Tacoma Friday night.
Yeah,
It was.
it was nice, wasn't it? Steady and yeah.
But on the other hand, in June in the UP, you get about 1 hour's worth of observing.
June in the UP, you're fighting off 65 million mosquitoes.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be able to stand still long enough to look at anything.
And when some black flies, that's
And
a
the
big
black flies are
Black
away,
flies, yeah.
Yeah.
In June.
But anyway, yeah, so. I like a very. But I'd be willing to volunteer to put some input, just as questions.
Well, yeah, we'll gather together. I know Brian's very good at putting together that thing, get, a small group together. Coordinate it with what we can do on the new website, for taking surveys and polls and stuff. Just make it-
Cause I think almost all the clubs that are reasonably active have a website and a contact,
Yes, it's like between, the Black clubs have got contacts, we can, socialize our way out to find, other clubs.
Corollary to this is, I may be wrong on this because I haven't only been to a couple open houses this year. But we don't seem to have the public attendance that we had at one time. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
And I think part of it is the Observer isn't a tool that it used to be. I don't think it's as widely read as it once was. We've got, I don't know what our Facebook works with sending out announcements that we have to go to the house and that sort of thing. But I don't have any suggestions now. We just might revisit how we get the word out. We don't have flyers anymore. We can talk about that.
That is a good point, Don, because if we had the lowbrow attendance we've been getting and the crowds we used to get, we'd really have some problems.
I was gonna add, whatever Charlie calls my name, the astronomy at the beach, this year we've gone really aggressive with the, boosting the event, so we created a Facebook event. And then we, spend a few bucks and advertise it, and so far I've been going for, I think I've got 3 weeks and 4 ads, and we've reached actually 20,000 different places, and we've got 30,000, they call it impressions, which is basically a reload page, like that. And I think out of that, we've gotten a number of event responses and other things based on that. And it costs, I don't think I've even spent $100 worth of their budget yet. And most of that initial first week, we got probably 12,000, and it cost almost $16. So it's very effective, and it can get the word out fast. For our open houses, a week or two would probably be fine, but a boost or two here and there can really make a difference. Get it out in the public. I think, like you said, the observer probably is the best. Yeah, yeah. And I think we just pay more attention to the marketing and public and get them out there. We've got good contacts with some of the area libraries. The one that is shooting just this afternoon. The Wasso group is enthusiastic, and so there are people. Yeah, I think we can leverage some of those outreaches that we do to pull in those people for a big open house event. And if we make it once a month, it can be special.
So Wasso has an amateur club now?
No, they have an airplane club, but they were fascinated with what they saw.
Yeah, they were really into it.
Well, the few open houses that I've done late, in these later years here. I don't know, cause I've never really been down at the 24, so I can't say what's going on down there. But you see a lot of parents with kids. And the problem is, once the kids get old enough to get the phone, they kind of lose interest. And we're kind of rambling, we probably should go get beer. I think the imaging issue is amazing what can be done. But it's also, it could ruin getting people started. Because the bar,
It's not as trivial as they make it out to be. I mean, my own personal experience is like, you sort of need to know how to stare out the scope first. And then you adapt the cameras and things to do what you want to do, and you have to adjust. It's a whole different world from visual, so.
but probably all of us, to one degree or another, got started because all of a sudden under the Christmas tree or on your birthday, there was a little scope. And that's what it was for me.
Gilbert 3-inch refractor.
No, mine was a
Oh, no, it was a reflector.
Mine was a 4¼ inch Edmund reflector,
Yeah. that was-
but it was just the scope.
Yeah.
I had to build my own mount, which is why I still to this day make stuff out of junk. But that's a problem, because the cost of doing imaging is prohibitive to kids getting started.
It's normally still above their range, so.
Okay. I thank everybody for their input. We'll continue this on, so
Yeah.
but appreciate it. So with that, Jeff,
Yeah, one second, camera. This month on the new website and all that, it basically wasn't doing a whole lot, because I don't know if you've heard or not, but the University of Michigan at the beginning of classes the day before, they had a quote unquote major incident, security incident, and it affected some very baseline servers. It shut down the Lowbrow site for about 3-4 days. It shut down all of the connectivity that we had going out. So we really couldn't do a whole lot of transfer, and now things are back to normal, everything's back to where it should be. It's running good, it's highly secure. But that's my main report. And the other thing is the astronomy of the beach, as Charlie mentioned, is next Friday and Saturday nights. We're hoping for a good turnout. The reach that I've gotten on the Facebook has been excellent. And NASA's Glenn Research Center is coming out to do various demos. What do they call it? They're doing their outreach and their whole spiel, and they're coming at their own cost to come out. So it should be a good show, and all the normal things. And we're expecting at least 50 to 70 telescopes. So Lowbrow's bring your telescopes out there and have fun. My own personal problem, I have some transmission issues in my band, so I may not be able to get away for Friday night. I intend to be there Saturday night.
by issues, he means total destruction.
Yeah, it's making some ratchety, crashy noises, so that's not good. I think that's all for the online thing. Can't figure out what's going on with that camera. It's like infrared or something. So that's why I have my laptop pointed at Charlie.
Oh, that's probably did it.
Yeah.
Good, thank you, Jeff. Jack.
Just a couple of things here. As you know, we did. Get our astronomical league pamphlets and brochures they sent out for new members in the clubs and stuff like that they do. And they sent us a group of them. And what I'm gonna ask is, anybody here's a new member, I would like to give them one of these. So I admit, gentlemen, it's fine, yes, sir. And we give it to our friends over here. I mean, I realize your background, you probably know most of that stuff already, but you probably hear about it. You get involved with other astronomy clubs, and they'll talk about it too. So they can all join our. Pardon? They can all join our. Yeah.
Is your cloud in there?
Oh, is it?
I don't know if it's
I
not.
got it.
Yeah.
Well, so,
neglected or.
Rally.
and I don't know if the camera can see this or not, but this is what we're talking about. And so I know some of you are members of the Astronomical League. This is one of their ways of promoting their Astronomical League and bring it closer. Here we go. So. Yeah, the other thing we're working on right now. Okay, cool.
Some people have Vanna, we have Charlie.
Yeah. Yeah.
All he needs is a sequin dress.
Yeah. The other program we're working on right now is just redoing our telescope loaner program for our equipment and that. And we'll probably have that done by the next meeting. And we'll get that published out in the newsletter and that. And finally, I don't know if there's anybody that's interested in this, but it's been a long time since we've done this. Still have the red ruby list if anybody would like to buy one. They're only $1, and a lot of people use them on their computer screens or laptops, all kinds of little things, or you can cut them up and use them on your flashlights. But they're very nice, and they're only $1 a piece. So if anybody would like one, see me, and you can pick one up. Other than that, I was out at the observatory today. Things are still looking good, and the road's cleared off. There's no trees or nothing on there because they had some heavy winds in between the last week out there. And the roadway up to the observatory is still cleared off. We didn't remove a tree that fell down there. Other than that, we should be okay.
Thank you, Jack. And in the Zoom audience, Dave.
Yeah. So I just want to maybe say a couple things. So when we were talking earlier, there is the possibility, there are quite a number of possibilities in terms of daytime events. That's only going to happen if people show an interest in it. And to me, I'd like to see a broader sample of people and what people think about the issue of people showing up to open houses or more broadly participation in the club. We'll figure out some way of doing that. But it is something we need to take seriously. I have a hard time believing the club is going to survive indefinitely without, dealing with this a little bit. But anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you, Dave. Does anybody in the audience or Zoom have anything else? Don?
Yeah, we've got an annular eclipse of the sun coming up for Saturday, 2014. It's going to be 35%, which would make a nice display on a sun funnel or any of the solar telescopes. It seems like we ought to have a public event where people can look at the eclipse. I'm not sure what my personal schedule is for that day, but I was thinking what days you can go out to Leslie Park.
It's October what?
October 14th, Saturday, October 14th. Is an annular eclipse of the sun. In Michigan, it'll cover the sun up 35%. So it's not a super total eclipse, but it's still pretty remarkable to watch the moon walk across the face of the sun. It seems like it would be a great during the day public outreach thing that anyway, be downtown Ann Arbor.
Yeah, we did that before.
Yeah, maybe wrong place on, what was it on 4th
Ashby Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the kind of the hill there. Yeah, great idea. See if we can get that together.
2 week of the rain, we contacted, we don't seem to have enough members here. You do. So participation.
Right.
I don't have a copy of that. 2 o'clock is maximum. 2 o'clock. So the hour inside, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
No, Brian, Otto's been a big advocate of taking astronomy to the people, so he might spring and do that.
Mm.
It's, frankly, it's during the day I could get out and my scope would come out too, so
Yeah.
that would be
Do you want to send something out about that, Don? Get that started or what's?
I'll send something out.
Okay. Cool.
I'll talk to the family. And see what we can do.
Excellent. Anything else? Hearing nothing, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
One other thing.
Oh.
Okay, the other thing that I think the club might be interested in is on October 7th and 8th, Planewave Computer is going to have an open house meeting.
Plainly.
That would be interesting. It'd be nice if some of our Lowbrows get together about that. Yeah.
What dates again?
October 7th. Plain Wave, I guess, has got their open house. Probably go to their website and if
Yeah.
they need any,
That's 9 to 5, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a real festival with things to do for kids and all kinds of stuff. Natural open house. Right.
I got information on it, somebody told me. They announced it on their, website, not their website, but, on their, cell phone, that, sent everything out to different people that. What, yeah. Would be an interesting thing to do, be fun to do.
I got it in my calendar, it's like I was hoping to get out there. Sorry, it's my wedding anniversary, so I'm not sure what's.
Yeah, I recommend going down there, so. Because last year, there were a whole bunch of 28 inchers complete in boxes ready to be shipped. All we need is somebody to distract.
And a big truck.
Yeah.
Now they're making 1 meters off the shelf now, that's just shit, it's unheard of.
Oh, if you go to their Facebook page, they had an announcement on their Facebook page, that's the other one the guy sent me. So,
I'll try to look that up tonight.
If you don't know where it is, just go down M52, you're right on the north side of Adrian, you got the old Votech, what we called it when I lived there. On the left side, on the west side is the old girls reformatory, and that's their property. If you get to the Spotted Cow, you went too far, turn around and go back.
Okay. And before I heard that motion to adjourn, just to remind everybody, they are doing an open house up at the observatory there, so. If you want to go check that out afterwards, so. With that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Here.
Support?
Support.
Okay. I assume nobody's opposed. Thank you very much.